And the analysis of Shields and Ponnuru, that is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and National Review senior editor Ramesh Ponnuru, who's sitting in for David Brooks this week. And it's good to have you with us.
Thanks.
Both of you.
Thank you.
So let's start out talking about the jobs report. 120,000 jobs created this past month, Mark, but fewer than what economists were expecting. The Republicans have already jumped all over it. We heard Mitt Romney saying earlier another example of the president's failed policy. Does this affect the presidential race?
Not the 1 month. I mean, there have been 25 months of private sector job growth and an increase of 4.1 million jobs in that period of time. It's been good. The problem is one of the expectations. They were not met. This is disappointing news. And as far as politically is concerned, Judy, basically you need a quarter, that is 3 consecutive months before economic attitudes begin to change. That's what happened to George Herbert Walker Bush, first President Bush, when he was seeking re-election in 1992. The economy had improved, and it was better, but the perception had not gained because there hadn't been 3 months pass. And I think that's where it is right now. There still is a sense that it's fragile, but it's moving in the right direction. What he can't use is a couple more months of news of this nature.
So still early, Ramesh, to make a difference?
I think that's right. And I think that part of what's going on with the public is there have been so many sort of false dawns in this economy that people, I think, are going to take a little bit longer to trust that there is a real economic recovery that they can feel. If there are some more months like this where you have disappointing jobs numbers, I think that's very bad news for President Obama. If it picks up, on the other hand, then this is just going to be a memory.
Well, we also saw the president and Governor Romney get into a sparring contest, if you will, when the president took on the Republican budget plan in the House. Mark used some very strong language, called it a Trojan horse. He said it's so far right, it makes the contract with America look like the New Deal. Smart for the president to be doing this, and smart for Governor Romney to be so closely allied with this budget.
I'd say it's tactically smart for the president. Mitt Romney comes through this on the cusp of the nomination now by consensus, more damaged than any presidential nominee in the history of modern polling. His unfavorable numbers are higher than anybody who's ever been about to be nominated. Only less popular than Romney is the Republican Party. And only less popular in the Republican Party are Republicans in Congress. So what the move by President Obama was to make Romney the candidate of the Republican Party, the candidate of the Republicans in Congress. That was the smart part tactically. Was the president convincing or persuasive? No. Social Darwinism is not a term that goes easily on a bumper sticker.
Which is one of the
one of the lines that he uses. Let's go to the rampants to take on these social Darwinists.
You don't think that's an effect?
I don't think it rings very evocatively.
But Ramesh, Governor Romney had used the word marvelous, which the president mocked in his speech to the newspaper editors. Is it smart for him to be so closely align himself with this, with the Ryan budget?
I'm not really sure that Governor Romney has a choice. If he had been away from, try to keep his distance from the Ryan budget, I think it would have created a very damaging rift between the congressional and the presidential wings of the party, and you just can't go into a big election that way. And I think in a way what President Obama has done is immensely clarifying. This is a serious disagreement between the parties. It's a very important set of issues, and we need a political debate on these questions. I think the problem with Obama's strategy right now is he's got the negative part, the critique of the Republicans' plan. What he doesn't have is his own administration's plan for dealing with our long-term debt problem. Tim Geithner, Treasury Secretary, said so on Capitol Hill. And until he fills that in, I think that there's a hole in his strategy.
You see it that way?
I think that what the president wants this to be about, he'd love to have it be about budgets and deficits and tax cuts. What you don't want is the economy with bad economic news to be the centerpiece. I think Governor Romney's paying a price for the bitterness of the fight to win this nomination. He has taken positions, for example, on immigration. He got to the right of both Rick Perry, who was a formidable threat, and Newt Gingrich, who emerged as a threat, by taking a more right leaning position, more stridently anti-immigrant, promised to veto the DREAM Act. He did the same thing with Rick Santorum on the Planned Parenthood. He got to the right of him on contraception. He embraced the Ryan plan, you recall, a year ago. Why? Because Newt Gingrich branded it right-wing social engineering. So it was a tactical move, and now he's married to that move. I don't think being closely aligned with Republicans in Congress or President Obama being aligned with Democrats in Congress is particularly helpful going into a campaign.
And Ramesh, we should point out, full disclosure, you have endorsed Governor Romney.
That's correct. Right. Made the case that he was the strongest of the Republican candidates.
And so do you see it as Mark does, that this is a risky strategy?
Well, absolutely. Taking on entitlement reform is risky. Everybody knows that. I think, though, that it's sort of fundamentally something that a lot of Republicans, and I think Governor Romney is one of them, view as a responsibility. I mean, if the Republican Party actually wants to keep taxes down over the long run, there's no way to do that without a kind of Medicare and Social Security reform. And in the case of Medicare reform, I think he's come up with a pretty intelligent one that has some Democratic advocates like Senator Ron Wyden.
Now, one story that did come out today about Governor Romney was about how he has decided to keep, I guess, from disclosing a large chunk of his wealth. I mean, a lot of it is in many different investments, and it's legal. He's apparently using a law that's available, but it means that he will not have to disclose a good bit of it. Is that?
He's got to get it out.
Is that going to? Can he hang on to that strategy?
They've been through this. I mean, it's painful if you're in the campaign because the candidate obviously doesn't want his privacy violated for all kinds of reasons. But Mitt Romney's problem is that he's not seen as connecting with ordinary people. He's got to get all discussion of estates and taxes and everything else. Get that out. I mean, just get it all out now. And don't let it drip, because it's going to drip out, and it's opening up. There's 100 journalists working on it right now to find out what exactly Bain's money was and how many jobs overseas it created.
Now you can see this playing out the way the debate over whether Romney would release his tax returns played out, which is the candidate resists disclosure. There's a steady drumbeat from reporters and from Democrats and from Republican rivals that he has to disclose. Eventually, some Republican backers of him will say, look, this is not going to be sustainable, and he will cave in. But having resisted that long will just make it a bigger story.
Okay, meanwhile, we've been talking about Mitt Romney. Meanwhile, Rick Santorum still is in the race. He says he's going to compete for his home state, Mark, of Pennsylvania. He says he's talking about Texas in the month of May. What is his path?
Well, Judy, the toughest thing is not even deciding to run. The toughest thing is withdrawing from a race, and especially after he's tasted some glorious moments. I mean, Rick Santorum looks at a state like Louisiana, where neither candidate, neither he nor Mitt Romney spent any real money, and he won 2-1. Every place else he's lost, he's been outspent 4 or 5-1. So he's saying, okay, just hang in there. I thought Richard Land, the Southern Baptist leader, who's been a supporter and admirer, urged him to withdraw before Pennsylvania, that he'd had a remarkable run, that he'd altered the debate, that he'd improved his own standing in the party, but he can't leave having lost his home state, especially after the defeat at Bobby Casey's hands 6 years ago.
Excuse me, Mark, is there any sign that he would drop out before Pennsylvania?
Well, he keeps saying that he's absolutely committed to the race and he's not going to drop out. But of course, that's something that politicians will say until the minute that they decide to say, well, actually, I'm dropping out. And I think that Mark is right, that if he were to lose Pennsylvania, that would erase all of the gains he's made. He's made a real comeback since his humiliating defeat in 2006, and that would all be wiped away.
Well, one of the things we see when you compare Rick Santorum's approval rating compared to the president, there's a big gap among women. There's also a gap, not as large, with Governor Romney, but it's still significant. Mark, there was a poll out this week that showed an 18-point so-called gender gap in support for the president ahead of Governor Romney. Is this a problem? Republicans traditionally have done a little worse among women, but is it worse this year?
Republicans have traditionally done better among men and worse among women, particularly women who are employed outside the home. And especially true among women who are either sole support of their household or on their own. whether in fact they want a government that's activist and interventionist to bring some sense of social and economic justice. But there's no question that there has been an inclination there. This is bad. These numbers are unsustainable for Romney. He has to turn Ann Romney loose. I mean, she's his best ambassador and a far better salesman than he is of Mitt Romney.
Is that the way he helps himself with women voters?
You know, I'm sure that the Romney strategists are very worried about this. And I think most Republicans understand you can lose the women's vote and still win an election. George W. Bush did it in 2004. Women went narrowly for John Kerry. But the kinds of numbers that we've seen in this week's polls, that can't be sustained if you're going to win a national election.
And as Mark said, we want to point this out, that Governor Romney is doing better among men. In some polls, it's
no, the women and obviously the White House, quite by coincidence, had a conference today on American
by
women.
complete coincidence.
Yeah, absolutely, it had totally divorced from the campaign.
One last thing, and that is what the president had to say in two different speeches or sets of remarks this week about the Supreme Court, in effect challenging the members of the court not to overturn the Affordable Care Act, health care reform. Is this, how smart is this on the part of the president to be going there?
Well, I think that the president's initial comments were sort of surprisingly clumsy for a former lecturer in constitutional law, and then he kind of had to walk them back because he seemed, as you know, to be suggesting that there was something wrong with the idea of a court striking down a law that had been passed by what he called a strong majority of Congress, which of course wasn't even the case with Obamacare. But he walked it back. He's made his argument. And I don't think the Supreme Court is going to pay much more attention to what he's saying than to what the Solicitor General said and to their own views about the Constitution.
I thought it was unhelpful for the president. I mean, especially the phrase, unfelicitous phrase, called unelected justices. I mean, that's sort of the rhetorical territory of traditional anti-court people coming from the right spectrum, with attacking the court for expanding the civil liberties or individual rights. And I thought he walked back the next day, but I don't think it's where he wants this campaign to be going into the fall.
And at one point referring to health care reform getting a big majority.
Well, big majority. There were 75 Democratic more seats in the House when we voted on health care, and it passed by 9. And it passed by one vote on a reconciliation procedure in the Senate. It was not. Social Security passed. 4 out of 5 House Republicans voted for it. 3 out of 4 Senate Republicans voted for it. Now, you can say the Republicans weren't available, but it was not a substantial majority.
Well, we are delighted to have the two of you with us. Ramesh Ponnuru, thank you. Mark Shields.
Thank you very much,
both.
Judy. Thank you.
Thank you.